Orange County. There's actually two separate drug rings, one dealing in cocaine, the other one in fentanyl, but the man at the center of both, they say, is a lieutenant in the Middletown Fire Department.
At exactly 6 a.m., red and blue lights flashed across the quiet streets of Middletown as federal agents stormed the city's main firehouse. What residents thought was an emergency call turned out to be a raid. Inside the very building, meant to protect lives, investigators uncovered cocaine, fentanyl, and marijuana stacked in metal lockers beside rescue equipment. The operation, led by the Drug Enforcement Administration and the New York State Police, revealed an estimated $2.4 million in narcotics and $75,000 in cash hidden within the station. 17 firearms were seized, and 12 suspects were taken into custody, including 2 active firefighters, 1 retired police officer, and several known members of an outlaw motorcycle group. Federal agents called it one of the most disturbing betrayals of public trust in recent memory. Data from the county health office showed that fentanyl overdoses had already claimed 130 lives last year, making every ounce of powder seized a potential lifesaver. The question haunting the community now is simple yet unsettling. How could a place built to save lives become the center of destruction? Comment 1 if you believe power corrupted him, or 2 if greed pulled him under. Stay with us because what investigators uncovered next would redefine betrayal. The investigation began quietly. 6 months earlier, when overdose data from local hospitals showed a sudden rise in cases linked to counterfeit painkillers marked as oxycodone. The pills carried a faint blue tint and were later identified as containing high levels of fentanyl. Analysts at the Drug Enforcement Administration cross-checked patient records with law enforcement logs and noticed an unusual overlap between overdose locations and emergency response routes used by the Middletown Fire Department. At first, the connection seemed impossible. The department's crews were known for their rapid response and clean service record. But the timeline matched too, precisely to ignore each spike in overdoses, followed the same days when Lieutenant Paul Smith's unit was on duty. His name at that time was just one of many highlighted in an internal report. No one yet suspected how deep his involvement ran. Federal agents set up a joint task force that included members from the DEA, FBI, and Homeland Security investigations. Surveillance began with low-level street dealers across Orange County. Wiretaps recorded coded conversations that mentioned gear, hoses, and water drills. Terms investigators later realized were fire department slang used to disguise drug distribution. It became clear that whoever led this network understood both law enforcement tactics and how to exploit emergency systems. Throughout the fall, agents traced financial transfers connected to small utility companies and volunteer fire associations. Each transaction, though legal on paper, was structured to conceal deposits under $10,000. The pattern pointed to someone who knew exactly how to move money without triggering automatic banking reports. Investigators soon discovered one of the shell accounts had been created using the personal details of a retired police officer, Robert Dunham. When confronted with evidence, Dunham's communications were traced to a burner phone that frequently pinged near the Middletown Firehouse. By December, the task force had collected enough surveillance to map the operation structure. Yet attempts to intercept shipments failed repeatedly. Couriers changed routes at the last minute. Surveillance cameras were disabled, and tip-offs seemed to reach suspects within hours. The investigation stalled until agents turned their attention to the firehouse itself. Hidden cameras were installed under the pretext of infrastructure maintenance. Within weeks, footage captured multiple late-night visitors entering through a rear service door. Vehicles bearing no department markings arrived and departed within minutes. What investigators saw next confirmed their suspicions: uniformed personnel unloading small duffel bags and transferring them to civilian cars. The drugs were being moved directly through a public institution designed to protect the city. One breakthrough came from an undercover operation in early January. A confidential informant posing as a courier gained access to one of the smaller distribution cells. He reported that the source of supply was someone with a badge who never gets pulled over. That line alone shifted the case from routine narcotics work to an internal corruption probe. For the next 2 months, agents followed every lead. Phone metadata, financial statements and GPS records converged on one name, Paul Smith. His role extended far beyond a casual contact. He was coordinating 2 distinct networks, one dealing cocaine through biker intermediaries and another pushing fentanyl pills across suburban communities. Meetings often occurred inside the Firehouse kitchen, disguised as off-shift gatherings. In March, agents finally intercepted a message between Smith and a mid-level distributor that read simply, "Firehouse open tonight." It was enough for prosecutors to authorize full surveillance and prepare for the coordinated raid that would come weeks later. By then, the task force understood that they were not chasing a street-level operation, but dismantling a system built on authority access and public trust. And at the center of it stood a man sworn to save lives. His name was now no longer a rumor. It was a target. When federal agents finally moved to unseal the evidence, the scope of the operation shocked even seasoned investigators. At the center stood Paul Smith, 42 years old, a lieutenant in the Middletown Fire Department, once decorated for rescuing a family from a burning apartment. His badge had granted him unquestioned access across county lines. That same trust became the perfect shield for a narcotics network that blended seamlessly into daily life. Smith's system was structured like a professional supply chain. The cocaine entered through small delivery firms registered under legitimate logistics names in New Jersey. From there, it was moved into Orange County, concealed in oxygen tanks, and sealed rescue kits labeled training equipment. Each container carried real department inventory tags to avoid suspicion. Once inside the Firehouse, the narcotics were repackaged into smaller batches and distributed through 2 different channels. The first network, driven by local bikers, handled cocaine. Their routes ran along Route 17 and Interstate 84, connecting Middletown with Patterson and Scranton. The second channel focused on fentanyl tablets disguised as prescription painkillers distributed through suburban neighborhoods by users turned dealers. Many transactions happened in parking lots of shopping centers or outside fast food restaurants where surveillance was difficult and foot traffic constant. Investigators estimated that between 2023 and early 2025, the operation had circulated more than 250 pounds of controlled substances across 3 counties, with an estimated street value exceeding $9 million. Each batch was small enough to avoid federal trafficking thresholds, but large enough to maintain steady revenue. In return, Smith funneled the profits through accounts registered to volunteer fire associations and retired personnel pensions. Financial analysts later confirmed that over $480,000 had moved through these channels within a year. None of the transactions triggered audits because they were split into deposits under $10,000. Each classic structuring agents also discovered that Smith used emergency fuel reimbursements as a cover for courier payments billing training exercises that never happened. The betrayal cut deep within the community. Residents remembered him as the firefighter who showed up first to every emergency, who handed toys to children during Christmas drives, yet behind closed doors, Smith had turned the department's trust and resources into an industrial-grade cover for narcotics trafficking. On the night of the final raid, more than 70 federal, state, and local officers coordinated simultaneous strikes across Middletown, Monroe, and Goshen. The operation began at 6 a.m., when agents surrounded the Firehouse under the cover of darkness. Teams moved in, silently cutting power to the rear entrance before breaching the bay doors. Inside, officers found Smith standing near a workbench, wearing his department jacket, attempting to hide 2 small packages inside a toolbox. The packages contained nearly 6 pounds of fentanyl, enough to produce hundreds of thousands of counterfeit pills. Nearby lockers held sealed bags of cocaine labeled as medical supplies. By 6:27 a.m., Smith was in custody. Robert Dunham was arrested minutes later at his apartment, where officers found another $40,000 in cash and ledgers recording. Distribution schedules. Authorities confirmed that at least 11 additional suspects including motorcycle affiliates and lower-level dealers, were detained in coordinated sweeps. Firehouse computers revealed encrypted spreadsheets detailing weekly distribution targets, including coded entries for station maintenance, which investigators decoded as shipment records. When prosecutors presented the evidence in court, the narrative was clear. This was not a street operation. It was an institutionally protected criminal enterprise. The Firehouse, a symbol of safety, had become a warehouse of poison. The fallout spread fast. County officials suspended multiple department employees pending investigation. The DEA classified the case as one of the most significant examples of organized corruption in local service agencies in over a decade. Public outrage followed parents who once called the Firehouse for help. Now gathered outside with signs demanding reform, the same building that once rang with alarm bells now stood sealed under federal lock, its red doors closed indefinitely. In a press conference later that afternoon, Special Agent Maria Cortez summarized the case. Every ounce seized today represents a life potentially saved, but it also reminds us how fragile trust can be when power is misused. For Orange County, the arrest of Paul Smith was not just the capture of a criminal. It was the collapse of a man who had blurred the line between duty and greed, and the moment when an entire community learned that corruption can wear a uniform. Within days of the operation, federal prosecutors filed multiple felony indictments against Paul Smith, Robert Dunham, and 9 additional suspects. Charges included narcotics distribution, money laundering conspiracy, and abuse of public office authorities, seized over $9 million worth of illegal drugs, $75,000 in cash, and 17 firearms. The Middletown Fire Department placed Smith and all implicated personnel on indefinite suspension. County officials confirmed that more than a dozen internal reviews were launched to prevent similar breaches of trust in the future. But beyond the arrests and statistics, the case left a deeper wound. It reminded every citizen that crime no longer hides in the shadows. It can live within the walls of institutions once built to protect. The betrayal of one firefighter became a mirror reflecting a larger truth about accountability and moral erosion. Federal officials stated that rehabilitation programs and public education campaigns would expand across the county, using the case as an example of vigilance and reform. In the end, this was more than a criminal case. It was a lesson about trust, the fragility of integrity, and the cost of silence. Because when corruption wears a uniform, it is not only the law that suffers, it is faith itself.